Why is it that you have more money than you've ever had before, yet you're sleeping worse? Why is it that when your account only had a few $100s, you were worried, but it was a familiar kind of worry, while the moment that number crosses $10,000, the anxiety becomes heavier, more uncomfortable, harder to ignore? Strange, isn't it? At this point, you should feel relieved. You should feel safe. $10,000 should feel like a win. But it doesn't. Instead, you check your bank account more often. You hesitate longer before every decision, and dangerous questions start creeping into your mind. What if I make one wrong move? What if I lose this money? What if I keep it, but manage it the wrong way? Here's what almost no one tells you. There is a financial threshold where money stops being just money. It becomes responsibility. It becomes pressure. It becomes something you could regret for years because of a single decision. And that threshold isn't $100,000. It isn't $1 million. It's $10,000. If you're close to this number or you've just reached it, stay with me. Because what comes next isn't about how to make money, it's about how money quietly begins to rewire your brain. I'm Mike. If you care about money in a practical, no-nonsense way, hit subscribe now. Because what's coming next could help you avoid the mistakes that keep a lot of people stuck for years. And let me ask you one question in the comments. Are you more afraid of losing money? Or of realizing you handled it the wrong way? When money starts to have weight. Before you had $10,000, money in your life worked very simply. Money came in. Money went out. Your paycheck arrived, and your bills pulled it away. You didn't have many choices, so you didn't feel much pressure to think deeply. But when the number in your account crosses a certain threshold around $10,000, everything begins to change. Not because you're richer, but because, for the first time in your life, you have something to lose. At this level, money is no longer just a tool for survival. It becomes the result of time, discipline, and sacrifice. And your brain starts treating it very differently. You stop asking, how much money do I have left? You start asking, if I make a mistake, what will the consequence be? That question is what creates the pressure. $10,000 doesn't instantly make you freer. It makes you more aware of risk. You think longer before spending. You hesitate more before every decision. And you begin to realize something slightly unsettling. Making money is hard, but keeping money is even harder. This is the moment many people don't realize they've stepped into. They think they simply have a little more money, but in reality, they've entered a completely different psychological level in their financial lives. And if you don't understand this shift, that invisible pressure will be the very thing that pulls you back to the starting line. How your brain reacts to $10,000. There's something extremely important that almost no one tells you. The human brain is not designed to handle accumulated money. It's designed to avoid risk. For hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, losing resources meant danger. So when you first accumulate an amount of money large enough to feel significant, your brain immediately switches into defense mode. And $10,000 is that threshold. At this level, money stops feeling like just a number. It starts to feel like time that has passed. Evenings you didn't go out, decisions you postponed, and moments when you chose not to spend even though you could have. That's why, when you think about the possibility of losing it, your brain reacts intensely. Behavioral research shows that people experience the pain of loss at roughly twice the intensity of the pleasure of gaining the same amount. In other words, losing $1,000 hurts far more psychologically than the joy of earning an extra $1,000. This is why having $10,000 doesn't make you twice as happy as having $5,000. If anything, it makes you more anxious. And this is where something dangerous begins to happen. Decision avoidance. You start overthinking. You delay investing because you're afraid of making a mistake. You leave money sitting still because you're not ready yet. You wait for the perfect moment, but that moment never comes. On the surface, this looks like caution. In reality, it's a psychological trap. Because not making a decision is still a decision. Every month your money sits still, inflation quietly erodes its purchasing power. No noise, no warning. Just slowly and inevitably. And the irony is this: your brain feels safer, while your financial position is actually getting worse. The longer you hold onto money without understanding what you're doing, the more conflicted you become. Part of you wants to protect the money. Another part knows that letting it sit still is a mistake. This internal tug of war is what keeps many people stuck at the $10,000 mark for years. Not because they can't earn more money, but because they failed to cross the psychological barrier that comes with truly having money for the first time. And this is the most important difference. People who build wealth aren't people who feel no fear about losing money. They're people who understand where that fear comes from and refuse to let it control every decision. If you're feeling confused, hesitant, or tense at this stage, that's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're entering a stage of financial maturity. The only real question is, will you let fear lead the way, or will you learn how to control it? The 3 traps that make money start to leak. When you reach the $10,000 mark, money rarely disappears because of one big mistake. It disappears because of small decisions, thoughts that sound reasonable on their own, but when added together, quietly destroy everything. The first trap is holding money just to feel safe. You look at the number and tell yourself, at least it's still there. At least I haven't done anything wrong. The problem is this: feeling safe is not the same as being financially safe. Your brain craves certainty. Money doesn't care about emotions. When you hold cash purely out of fear of making a mistake, you're choosing to stand still in a world that's always moving. And in finance, standing still usually means falling behind. The second trap is rewarding yourself too early. You start thinking, I've worked hard enough. I deserve to be a little more comfortable. And yes, you do deserve it. But the issue isn't rewarding yourself, it's timing. At the $10,000 mark, every spending decision stops being just about today. It becomes a decision about your future 10 or 20 years from now. A small upgrade can quietly erase a huge amount of future growth. Not because the amount is massive, but because you break discipline right when it's being formed. The third trap is comparing yourself to the wrong people. When you're broke, you don't compare much. You're just trying to survive. But once you have $10,000, you start looking up at people buying homes, driving new cars, posting big numbers online. And suddenly, your $10,000 feels insignificant. What you don't see are the debts, the pressure, and the stories behind those results. You only see the outcome and use it to judge yourself. This kind of comparison doesn't push you forward, it makes you impatient. And impatience is the #1 enemy of long-term finance. These 3 traps have one thing in common. They push you to react emotionally instead of acting strategically. And at the $10,000 mark, every emotional reaction can pull you far back. Not because you lack ability, but because you don't yet have the right mental framework for this stage. In the next part, I'll talk about the single most important thing you must change if you don't want to stay stuck at $10,000 longer than necessary. What must change after you reach $10,000? If you remember only one thing after this video, remember this: $10,000 is not an achievement, it's a test. Not a test of income, but a test of how you think about money. Most people fail at this stage, not because they can't earn more, but because they don't change their mental framework when they enter a new phase. Before $10,000, your strategy is to earn money and survive. After $10,000, your strategy must shift to protecting, assigning roles to, and deploying money. And if you keep using an old mindset for a new stage, money will quietly start leaking away. The first thing you need to do is redefine the role of that money. Not every dollar of the $10,000 has the same job. Part of it exists to keep you calm. Part of it exists to protect you from shocks. And the rest exists to grow. When every dollar has a clear purpose, your brain stops panicking. You no longer feel like everything you do is wrong. The second thing you must change is how you evaluate risk. Risk isn't just losing money. Risk is also not letting money work. Holding cash purely out of fear of making a mistake isn't being cautious. It's letting fear run the decision-making. People who build wealth don't try to eliminate all risk. They choose favorable risk and keep it under control. And finally, the most important shift at this level: you must treat $10,000 as your new floor, not your ceiling. Not, I have finally made it here, but From this point forward, I don't go below this level. The moment you think this way, your decisions begin to change. You spend more slowly, you invest with intention, and you stop chasing short-term comfort in exchange for long-term stability. In the next part, I'll talk about something very few people prepare themselves for. Why most people never manage to hold the $10,000 line, and how you can avoid becoming one of them. Why most people never hold the $10,000 line. There's a truth that's hard to hear, but you need to hear it right now. Most people will reach $10,000 at least once in their lifetime. Very few will ever hold on to it, not because they're unintelligent, not because they're lazy, but because they misunderstand what's actually difficult. Earning $10,000 is hard, but keeping $10,000 for years is many times harder. And here's why. When you first reach this level, you're still living with the habits of someone who's never really had money before. You react quickly to emotions. You use money to relieve stress. You treat each month as a reset, instead of seeing your finances as a long road. So what happens? An urgent expense shows up, then a reasonable exception, then a just this one time. Every time the reasoning feels perfectly justified, and every time your balance drops a little lower, no collapse, no disaster, just a slow leak. Until one day, you look back and realize you're standing exactly where you started. The most dangerous part is this. Your brain begins to normalize it. You tell yourself, maybe I'm just not good at holding money. Everyone goes through this. I'll figure it out later. And in that moment, you don't lose money. You lose trust in your ability to control your finances. People who build wealth aren't people who never make mistakes. They're people who notice mistakes early and correct them quickly. They don't let $10,000 quietly slide to $9,000, then $8,000, then $6,000, while telling themselves everything's still fine. They set one simple rule. This line does not get crossed unless it's truly a life or death situation. Not because of the money itself, but because of the discipline that money represents. If you can hold the $10,000 line long enough, you don't need luck. You don't need fancy strategies. Everything after that starts to become easier than you expect. In the final part, I want to tell you one last thing directly, something your future self desperately needs you to understand right now. The real lesson from the $10,000 mark. The most important thing I've learned about money didn't come from earning it, but from the moment I almost ruined it. $10,000 isn't an achievement. It's the first time you're forced to take responsibility for financial decisions that carry long-term consequences. At this level, the problem is no longer income. The problem is whether you're clear-headed enough to keep emotions from controlling your money. The people who go far aren't the ones who earn more. They're the ones who keep their discipline when no one is forcing them to be disciplined. If you treat $10,000 as something to celebrate, it will slip away. If you treat it as a floor that must not be broken, everything that comes after becomes much easier. If the way you think about money shifted even slightly after this video, hit subscribe. This channel won't make you rich overnight. It helps you avoid paying stupid tuition for lessons you never needed to learn the hard way. I'll see you in the next video.